I heard that. As a matter of fact, I didn't hear that because I don't have these on. Ah, there we go. Good. Now, we'll begin with a friend. Actually, he made our first. We'll begin with a friend, colleague, and designer of our first lenticular membership card, Brian Loeb. He was the closest person to the 9/11 attacks to actually have a stereo camera loaded with film and the ability to point and use it. Now, operating a 50s era stereo camera can be quite complicated. And under the circumstances that he took these images, even more so. He's currently managing director of a company called Digital Pulp, located right here in New York. Brian Loeb, Sheldon Aronowitz, and myself did our best to chronicle in 3D the experience of the 9/11 attacks. Do we have you out there, Brian? Oh, by the way, let me show you before I ask. This was the great card. It's a nice flip. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but I'm going to flip you out. I think I got it to work.
Well done.
Isn't that cool? So, oh, Brian, good, you're up and running. So now I'm going to share screen, and you don't need to see me because she had enough of me. Stand by. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Loeb.
We're going to look at these 12 images that I took on September 11th and well, about a week later. Turned out to be kind of a big part of my life, just because I live in the neighborhood and got very involved in some of the efforts afterwards for about 2 months. On September 11th, I actually wasn't working, and I kind of woke up that morning to a phone call from a friend who said, like, hey, there's a fire in the World Trade Center, you should check it out. And so I woke up and I looked at my table, and I had this beautiful, like, high-end video camera that a friend had loaned me for a project. And for some reason, the thing that I picked up to walk outside was my stereo camera. Don't know why to this day. And I walked downstairs and started stupidly walking closer and closer to the World Trade Center. And, you know, I can't say that I was thinking like a documentarian, like I have to take some awesome pictures of what's going on. It was all sort of on autopilot and a little bit in shock. And of course, the closer that you were to the building, the more that you could see with your eyes what was happening and you know, what was coming out of those gaping holes. So it was a stunning realization. And then suddenly, you know, the crowds on the ground started coming at me in the opposite direction, you know, with fear on their faces and walking and you know, jogging and recognizing that you really need to walk away from this and not toward it. And yeah, I mean, you're seeing what I saw, and these images, I guess, because they're in 3D, kind of bring you back to that time in a maybe a little bit more of a visceral way.
Brian, what were the sounds like? What did this sound like now?
You know, it was, if I'm thinking back, it wasn't coming from the building, but it was coming from people saying, "Oh my God, what the fuck?" You know, like, what's going on? Can you believe this? And again, just the chaos on the street, because, you know, we New Yorkers, we hadn't seen something like this before and didn't know what to expect, except, as I said, if you're on the ground and looking, you notice that, you know, human beings are coming out of the building, and you just recognize this is an unimaginable catastrophe that's going on. And I don't know, I mean, my brain couldn't process it, and it just felt like everyone was confused and stupefied and just not knowing what to make of this, except that it was very dangerous and it wasn't done. And so, yeah, so the people on the street started to turn into, you know, crowds of people that were rushing again north as I was walking south, and I began to realize, oh wait, maybe not a good idea, you know, to get much closer to the building. And this was just, you know, a few blocks away from my apartment. I went to the World Trade Center several times a week. You know, it was just part of my neighborhood. I was just there the night before, in fact, on a date, and I was thinking, you know what, the two of us should go up to the Windows on the World. There's a great bar up there. It's so much fun to do. Maybe you'll do it next weekend. Just the night before is just so much a part of my life.
How close is this to your home, to where you live? This shot,
A block away.
block away.
Right. I mean, this shot, or maybe two.
How did you know that that had happened? Was that the news, or what alerted you to this?
Yeah, a friend called.
Oh,
I might have slept through it. I, was out late the night before, and yeah, and I didn't have work that day. So, at this point, I was a little closer to my apartment, and the first building fell. And here sound is a huge part of the memory. It was a visceral, like down to your bone marrow kind of sound, a feeling sound that I'll never forget. It was a whooshing kind of a vacuum kind of sound, but yeah, it shook you as the building was falling. I mean, so close, right in front of your face. And I don't know how or why, but I held up the camera over my head and I just started taking pictures. Didn't know if they would come up, didn't, think about the settings on the camera or anything like it. I just had camera in hands, was watching this unimaginable thing, and I just shot some pictures. And I, as I kind of came to after that whole experience, just thought wow, I should take these to the lab and see what's there.
could you actually feel that? Because you must have felt it in your feet. That crumbling.
Like I said, it was like a whole body experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure everyone was in shock as it happened.
How did the
Um,
crowd around you react?
I mean, it just it was oh shit, look what's happening. This can't be real. It can't be real, I think, was what we were all thinking. But of course, clouds of debris would be coming, moments later, and people would be running for their lives moments later too. But just this moment of oh my God, this massive icon of New York, this thing that would never change was suddenly, blown away to the ground.
Could you take us through that? Because that's really a powerful moment. So the crowd's around, everybody's looking at this thing before it collapsed, before it got to this point, right? That's the initial shock stage. Did they quiet down when that rumble happened? What were the steps? I'm just curious when it got to, because by then but when that thing disappeared, they must have been screaming by then, right? I mean, people must have started yelling, right?
I can't say that I remember all the sounds, but I do remember that, I mean, it was right there, right in front of you. And so, we were all witnessing this thing that was so close you could practically touch it. It was the most beautiful, clear day. This kind of legendary description of the September 11th morning that everybody starts with when they tell their story is that, it was like this amazing, perfect fall day. And in fact, if you turned around 180 degrees and looked north, it was still that day. And again, the debris hadn't quite started yet. So we were all just how could this have happened? And oh my God, and what do we do? And the police were just doing the very first moments of kind of riot control, because who knows how to handle a moment like that. But I think we were all stupefied, and yet still sitting there on the most beautiful day you could imagine. And this thing happened right in front of you, but it still, wasn't the clouds of dust and debris that were to come. So it was just this very strange moment in time, which, was the definition of surreal. This can't be happening, but it is happening, and it can't be true, but it's clearly true. And what do we do? And nobody knew.
Did you run home or did you keep running? So,
Well, I was just a couple of blocks from home, and after the building fell down, I walked home, and I took the elevator upstairs. Like the power shut off much later in the day. More buildings were to fall down, including 7 World Trade Center. Um, but yeah, it's still my apartment faced north. So as I was calling my friends, I was still kind of looking up at this perfectly clear blue sky, and on the TV, the nightmare was there. But it took time for the whole catastrophe to sweep over Tribeca.
Well, you were a part of this, so I mean, the shock alone. I mean, there's got to be shock, even though you're not at the front of the building. Just viewing that and trying to digest it in your brain, that you had to be in some form of shock of like, okay, what's the next? In other words, what was the next thing your plans went out the window, right? I mean, we knew that for the day, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I went back downstairs after I called a couple of friends, and I walked to the corner, and I didn't have my camera this time, and I walked downstairs looking. The view is something like this. It was very strange. I just like walked to the corner and looked at the second tower, and it fell down. And I was like, you know what? Going back inside.
Did you wonder to yourself what could possibly happen next?
No, but it was weirdly like it waited for me. I just kind of walked out to the corner till I had this kind of same view that we're looking at now, and the second tower collapsed, and then it was just setting in with everyone that this is the most unimaginable catastrophe that could happen.
So is the panic, because there has to be a moment when you do kind of think, okay, yes, do I have food? Do I have what's happening? Like, did any of that go through your head? Like, what do I do? What if this is worse than it looks like? And that's you got my point.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in a fancy, high-rise building, and everything was fine in my apartment, for a few hours until, the building just shut off. And, in a building like that, the water is also run on electric. So, there was no living in the apartment anymore. And so I had to, walk downstairs and find another place to be for a couple of days. And the area was all shut down as well by police. So even people that lived there, I think maybe it was 48 hours or so until I could get back to my home.
And what was that experience leaving? Like when you power's off, everything's off, you realize you got to go. So the elevator was still working at that point, or did you have to walk down the stairs?
No, I had to walk down the stairs and, just find a friend to stay with. And then, I mean, it was the biggest news of the century, and things were starting to set in. But I guess I began to start feeling a few of the first feelings of like, hey, what did I just experience, and what did I just go through, and where do I go? And I don't have a home, and I can't get back to my home, and I'm sleeping on someone's couch, and I don't have my stuff. And I just, yeah, and it was the only thing that anybody and everybody was talking about. But somehow I had been there, and yeah.
And I know that cell service had been completely disrupted. So were you able to actually get out reliably, or were people getting to you and all that?
Yeah, I don't really remember having a problem with that. And I found my way to friends who were, of course, willing to take me in. And I wanted to get back as soon as I could, if only to take care of my cat. But yeah, I mean, something about this experience, I had sort of been ready to move to San Francisco, being a kind of a lifelong New Yorker. And I made this big life decision. And after 9/11, I knew I had to stay in New York, and not just New York, but downtown New York. And some people just did exactly the opposite. People in my neighborhood just wanted to be as far away from New York as they could be. And for me, somehow this whole experience led me to only want to be in New York. Can't really explain that.
Are you staying are you in the same place that you were? Apartment?
No. I moved maybe 9 years ago. I still live in the West Village, so very close by. But yeah.
How long did it take you to decide to move? From
I moved just because I had a kid, and so in a one-bedroom apartment.
Oh, okay. Other things.
Yeah.
Life also went on, right?
Yeah, no, Tribeca is a wonderful place to live. So this is another shot of the building collapsing, and
Now, now again, this shot is 2 blocks from your house, or is this right outside?
Yeah, it's a block and a half, something like
About a
that.
block and a half.
Mhm.
And you felt that was close. You just didn't want to. I mean, what stopped you from going further down? I can
Well,
see what could stop you, but
I
I'm just
had
wondering.
gone further down in the previous shots, but it was the people rushing in the opposite direction that made me think like, you know, maybe not a good idea to keep going in that direction.
How far did that dust cloud get?
Well, it covered a lot of Tribeca after the second tower fell, and just coming back to the area and just the cars covered with, you know, papers from the buildings, and this cloud of dust was unbelievable. This is the only picture that has a lot of people in it at that moment, and you can see it's just everybody is just kind of dumbfounded. Like, what do you do? Nobody has a behavior ready for a moment like this.
Is this Church Street? What street are you on right there?
That's Church Street.
Church.
So yeah, so a few more pictures here. And what happened was when I came back to my neighborhood a couple of days later, I was walking by, you know, this 4-star French restaurant, Boulet, that you might have remembered if you lived in New York, and it was open. And I was like, wait a second, this whole area is closed. Why is this restaurant open? And so I walked in, and it turns out that restaurateurs around the city had learned that the rescue workers weren't getting food. They were having this terrible, you know, ham sandwich in a plastic bag delivered to them. And so they started an effort through David Boulet's restaurant to just send provisions from all of these amazing top restaurants down to Boulet, have volunteers, you know, process this food and create, you know, a cafeteria style restaurant for the people at working at Ground Zero. And so I immediately started working there, and because I'm a manager, I became a manager of volunteers. And so this is what I did for a couple of months. Um, and you know, the first few days, I was, you know, this was like a big case of lobsters would come in, you know, from Lutece uptown, you know, or something from the Four Seasons, like amazing cuisine. But throughout the effort, you know, we were making wonderful food for them. But in those first days, there was a restaurant that we called the Green Tarp that was literally sort of in Ground Zero before it was more cordoned off, you know, with security. And it was just a building, you know, bordering the Ground Zero square where like the front wall of the building had been demolished by the explosion. And so there was a green tarp hanging there. And so we set up a buffet and just were serving food to, you know, firemen and rescue workers and soldiers that had been brought in from around the country. And, you know, and it's just interfacing with all of these people was an experience in and of itself. But these shots were just, you know, kind of taking a walk from the Green Tarp restaurant over to the pile and taking some pictures that I definitely shouldn't have been taking. And so again, it wasn't really thoughtful, like, where can I go and report on this? It was just grab a few shots while I'm standing there. But they still are really kind of evocative shots of this kind of view of the pile that few people were actually seeing up close like this.
What did smell? What were the smells like down there? How, you know, all that.
Terrible, yeah, smoky, strange, you know, all of the stuff that burned that was still smoldering, you know, for several days after the crash. Um, you know,
Did they give you a respirator? Or did you have to wear a
no,
respirator or
no.
anything?
And nobody was really thinking about that, but of course, like, what a foolish thing that we all did when you think about the amount of like plastic and computer parts in huge bulk that were incinerated and in the air.
That's true, but what you did was so courageous because people forget, but we all believed that they'd find someone there. There was still this belief system. There's
Well,
maybe a pocket, maybe something. So that was, you know, so
I think that the thing that I felt through this, you know, couple of months was that everybody in America, there was such a unification for a short time, obviously, it doesn't exist anymore, but everybody wanted to help and everybody wanted to do something. And doctors, flocking to hospitals, waiting for the patients that never came. And people driving in a pickup truck with, half a dozen people. We're here from Minnesota and we just want to help. Like, we're ready. There's nothing to do. And so our restaurant, the thing that we were doing, was a thing to do. And we could take volunteers and we were working 24 hours. And so, as a manager of this, I was just constantly thinking how working with the people that were volunteering to tell them, like, it's so important that you're doing this. And thank you for cutting these onions. You're making such a difference. And, I'll show you how to do this, but it's so important that you're here. And so as much as this effort was helping, the rescue workers get some good food to eat, I think it was also helping all these people who came to New York to help, who didn't know what they could do, but just felt compelled to do something.
That's a perfect description. I know 'cause when I was at the broadcasters outside, I had a guy show up, a cave diver with all the ropes and stuff, saying, "You can, I know how to survive in a small piece." He was taken in there too. So yes, people, he wasn't from New York. He'd driven in from someplace in the Midwest. But yeah, that and such an important thing to do, regardless of what harm you could come to, because that's the best part of human nature.
Yeah, I mean,
The best part.
right. Just so. I think we all knew that we were safe, and so many people were, perished through, happenstance and through their bravery, and everybody else just felt like, what can I do? How can I help? I'm grieving like everybody else, but being able to do a little something made you feel a sense of community and a sense that, it wasn't completely futile, and there was some way that you could feel like you were contributing to this, unimaginable loss.
A quick question: where actually were you born and raised?
I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, which was just a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I came here to go to film school at NYU in 1982, and I got stuck.
Well, we're glad we stuck you on the New York Manhattan flypaper.
And this is the last picture, and kind of an iconic final one, just with this, anonymous fireman and the FDNY logo on his jacket, with the file in front of him. Such a, symbol of the memory to me of, these amazing, selfless, heroic people. My apartment was right across the street from a firehouse, but, everywhere you go in New York City, you'll still see plaques, outside of each firehouse of the amazing people who gave their lives, running up those stairs to, do what they, devoted their life to doing, which was saving others. And yeah.
How long from the collapse were these images? I mean, roughly, do you recall?
About a week.
About a week. Wow. Yeah, there was still belief you'd find people. That was still a time when when they were still believing, that there was
Right.
something, some possibility.
Yeah, and the whole scene was not, quite organized yet, in terms of security and everything else, but there was an open door to those of us who were working on this, this food effort, to get down and run this restaurant. And boy, what a trip that was! Just like serving this amazing food. I remember we were like, grilling these amazing, swordfish fillets, just like the top quality food you could get in New York. And a confused, 18-year-old soldier from the Midwest, just like, this is the first thing he's ever seen in terms of, an event like this. And here he is. And I'm offering him, broccoli and saying like, your mother would want you to eat this broccoli. And he was like, yeah, I think she would. Yeah, okay, I'll take some. Just the kind of every walk of life, and everyone was so overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's
all ages. Nobody could process it for a long time.
no, that's an amazing, and you're just one little. I love these little stories that come out, because there's thousands and thousands of them, and your just your participation and that little piece you're trying to accomplish to make it better. It's just a wonderful story, man. You know, feeding those folks and believing that you can help when it's absolutely helpless, right? You look at that pile of shit and you go, how can you do anything? But you know what? You come and you feed the kid broccoli. You say, fuck it, excuse me.
Yeah.
We're going to stay here and do what we got to do to make it happen. Amazing. Best part of human nature, man.
Yeah, I was lucky to be involved in that effort because it really helped me, get through the time.
Sure, you don't walk away from that without being affected. I can tell it affects you now. It's incredible, incredible thing to have lived through, and incredible thing to have participated in the way you did. And you recorded it. I know you couldn't run through that crowd going, "It's an emergency. I got to take a 3D picture for history." That hardly cuts on the ice, but you did it. You served those people. You gave them what they needed in sustenance, and you went out and you recorded it for the rest of us to see. And that's incredible. And we all thank you for that from the bottom of our hearts. As a matter of fact, wait a minute. They didn't do it last night. We're doing it now. Hey, folks. One of the members who got to me through a stereo realist camera was George Sikorsky. And great guy. Plus, he lived up in Yorkville, my own neighborhood, but he was like way older than me, so it was like great. I was able to listen to stories about my own neighborhood from where I was born and raised, from George, who his hero son, and George passed away last year. Happy guy, stayed active. It's like 87 or something. Couldn't stop George, man. And we were fortunate enough to interview him and travel through New York. Jamie Smith and I, E. James Smith and I. And we took him to all those places. We took him to his old neighborhood. And you'll hear about the Slocum. We brought him down there to shoot. You'll see it in the next moment or two. And then we took him down to the building collapse. The World Trade Center with those big monuments. And he was trying to search out and find his son's name. And I'm going to be redundant, but sometimes it's... Is that any surprise? Anyway. It was really a miracle moment because we just picked a spot. I just parked the car to pump, give a shit. We got the shots with George. We could still see the car if they were going to tow it. So the ticket I can handle. So he was trying to remember where his son's name was in there. And then when we got to it, mysteriously and unbelievably, there was a flag into his name. Now, who put it there, we don't know. But it was, and then George, the story you're going to hear, George never told me. He was such a humble guy. Until we got down there, he didn't explain all this stuff. It was heartbreaking. I could hardly hold the camera. Jamie could hardly hold the mic. But just like Brian did, got the shots, man. We just held on and ever grateful for bumping into such a wonderful guy. So anytime you are ready, Mr. Heiser, you can let it rip. This is an advertisement from a 1999 magazine describing the view from atop the World Trade Center. It reads, "It feels great at the top. New Yorkers like Bobby Short know where to go for the best view in town. Top of the World Trade Center observatories, the highest point of Manhattan. Top of the World offers visitors the unique and magical beauty of the city and its surroundings." Who could ever have imagined it would end up like this? The stereoscopic 3D images that you're about to see were recorded within a few days to a few months after the September 11, 2001 attack on the World Trade Center. They were captured by Sheldon Aronowitz and myself as a duty to history. We used stereo realist 3D cameras and Kodachrome film. There were long hours of waiting for press access. I had credentials due to my work in the broadcast industry. No one was concerned about the air we were breathing because we were told that it was safe. And we all soon forget that for a while it was thought that there were survivors trapped in the rubble. During the presentation, you'll notice the weary, bruised dogs and their handlers. I must have heard every opinion as to who, why, where, when, how. Volunteers arrived from around the country. Cave divers told me how small a space a human can survive in. Yet the hospitals that were waiting for patients never saw any, other than workers who had been injured while clearing the debris. You're going to hear the words of New York Stereoscopic Association member George Sikorsky describing his hero son's last minutes. So while the images bear no direct connection to what George is explaining, they capture the heart and soul of the experience. Take it away, George.
My son, Gregory, he was the third son. He was an auto mechanic, worked at my gas station for many years. He knows a lot about mechanics. He lived dangerously because he was a skydiver, joined the Marines, anything dangerous he liked. He liked parachuting. So finally he said, I'm going to join the fire department. He went to rescue fire department, Rescue 41. One day, on a Tuesday, September 11th, he's stationed up in the Bronx by the Yankee Stadium. They got a call to come down to Manhattan, World Trade Center. They went from the Bronx fire station to Manhattan in 18 minutes. I don't know how they got it, but there was no cars on the road. They just came down there. They landed down here in the South Tower. He could open up elevators, like the Jaws of Life that opens up doors for the thing. He could open up elevators. They said there's a fire in the elevator on the 41st floor. He walked up 41 stories with this big pack on his back, Jaws of Life, and went up there with 6 people altogether. But he's 41 stories high. We couldn't find him for 8 months later. 7, 8 months later, we're looking for him. He must have fell through the elevator and landed three flights in the basement, South Tower. Now we couldn't find him because the ramp, the trucks were coming up to get the debris out of the ramp here, and he was buried under that ramp. So at the end of 7 months, they took the ramp down and they started digging there, and then they found the Jaws of Life, that thing. Oh, 41 is written on there. They said, we stopped digging because they're digging with the big bulldozers and cranes. They did it all by hand. They found them. They called me up 2 o'clock in the morning. We came down here, and they're pulling them out 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're watching the thing. And the one fighter says, we're up on the ramp there. So he says, you come down here. You hold on to the stretcher. So I was one of the pallbearers that pulled them out. He belonged to the Hillcrest Fire Department, Rockland County Hillcrest for many years. They donated a lot of money. They put up a big party, parades, everything. They closed the whole town up there. Amazing what they did. The fire department from Rockland County, called Hillcrest Fire Department. Thousands of people. Then they got a couple of parks up there. They named the street after him, Greg Sikorsky Street, right across the street from my gas station. I own a gas station on Route 306 in Muncie. Right across the street is Greg Sikorsky Street. They opened up in Haverstraw. You go to Haverstraw Town Hall, they got a statue of him. 2 firefighters and 1 police department fire. And you see a full-size statue of him, Greg Sikorsky, and the other 2 people. They got Marina, and the Marina, they got the Haverstraw Marina, they got plaques on it, Sikorsky. Over in Israel, they got a big plaque over there. I mean, the name in the plaque. If you go here in the World Trade Center, they got a name for everything around the pool. And one day in the New York Times, one photographer took a picture of just the section and hit Gregory Sikorsky, all by accident. So we got that picture hanging up in the gas station.
This is a screen grab of the yearly ceremony of reading the names of all of the people who perished. I was told by several of the construction chiefs, and it was also reported in the newspaper, that hundreds of these crossed I-beams stuck out of the basement of the structure. Here you see a piece of what's left of the building stuck to one of the I-beams. It was customary for the construction workers to autograph the beams. The image taken by Sheldon not only captures the moment, but leverages the impact of 3D. This is where what's called a stand-up was done for news reporting every evening. This is my friend Jim McGillian's satellite uplink truck, and as you can see, the World Trade Center is a prominent part of his logo. This was a shrine not too far from Times Square for a stewardess who was on one of the planes. All the stores located in that area were closed for quite some time, so I think these guys were happy to see the tourists. After being in that neighborhood for a while, you had the feeling that I can only describe as a mix between a rock show, a flea market, and a mining disaster. Now back to George for a moment. What George didn't mention was that his son Greg inherited George's passion for working on cars and had recently purchased a 1939 fire truck and had just begun to prepare it for restoration when he lost his life on 9/11. The community rallied around and rebuilt the fire engine that's displayed in parades in his hometown. There's yet another part of this amazing story of love, fate, courage, honor, and sacrifice. Approximately 100 years separates the deadliest fire tragedies in New York City's history. The World Trade Center, where 2,996 perished on September 11, 2001, and the Slocum disaster, where 1,021 perished on June 15, 1904, mostly women and children. And the Sikorsky family is connected to both. You see, Greg Sikorsky's grandfather was on the Slocum as a baby. He was taken off the boat for a diaper change, and the boat left without he and his mother. Here are some of the images of the Slocum after the fire in 1904. Don't leave yet, folks. I got one more story to wrap it all up. As I was making various trips down to the World Trade Center, I noticed this billboard sign for a movie on Showtime that was about to premiere called The Believer. Here's what it looks like up close. Now you got to remember that all the people who were working at Ground Zero had to pass this sign. Coincidentally, I was preparing to do some work with Showtime. So when I met my friend Jim Dixon at Showtime, I immediately said, Jim, the sign on the West Side Highway has got to go. And he knew exactly what was on that sign because it was also on the buses and the cabs. It was advertising clear and simple. But it didn't belong there. I passed by within a week or two and noticed the sign had been changed to this. I was pleased with myself, but not pleased enough to stop and take a picture, so about a month later I stopped by and took this shot. Now, there was nothing heroic about this, mind you, but the better part of human nature went straight up the line. from Jim to the next person to the next person, and it finally got to the sign guys. And everybody did the right thing. I'm just proud to be the first domino. Thank you for listening and feeling along with me. But anyway, before we go, I'm going to read to you just a little spot. We're going back. We're going in the circle. We'll finish in the circle. We're almost into the after party, which was the Coming to Our Senses book. And it just coincidentally, it worked out that I'm going to read you this quote in a minute. But before we go, let me read you the opening dedication from Sue's book. It's a quote from a guy who lived nearby me and wrote a bunch of songs from his heart that captured countless hearts. He wrote If I Had a Hammer, Turn, Turn, Turn. They're two of his anthems, but major catalog. But maybe his biggest claim to fame, really, was saving that Hudson River that I showed you before on the side there. That's the river on Manhattan's west side that leads out to the ocean and created an inland passage for goods, and basically you could say created New York City. It fell into complete pollution and horror, and only a guy with an imagination and a guitar and a sailboat and a belief that you can do whatever you put your mind to could have pulled off. And he did. He really did have a hammer. So let me read the quote. And I'll see you at sometime during the after party, unless they throw me out, which I wouldn't doubt because I went way over. Sorry, man. Sorry. Quote from, she picked it, so I just even love it. Even more.
John, just to confirm, so we're going to play the show out, and then we're going to have an after party. Yeah. Okay. Just
yes, thank you. Thank you for checking. Yeah. Hey, everyone, these guys are so great. I don't want, you're going to ask for a raise. They'll unionize on me. So, I'm trying to, but they really are great, man. Unbelievable. And they volunteer, just like those other folks, just for the good of it all. Anyway, let me get to this. Incredible. I am blessed with the people around me, man. You're not going to see Johnny Laser complaining. Nope. Nothing to complain about. Shoes are comfortable, stomach is full, and I'm around beautiful people. I don't want no more than that, man. You can keep the boat. You can keep the yacht. Well, anyway. The key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. And that guy who fixed the river and wrote all those songs was named Pete Seeger. American folk singer, songwriter, and river fixer.